What if I told you that one of the most celebrated philanthropists on planet Earth, a man who built his public image on saving children from disease, repeatedly walked into the Manhattan townhouse of a convicted sex offender, not once, not twice, but multiple times, over multiple years? Pause. After that man had already been convicted, after the world already knew what he was, and that when confronted, this philanthropist's story changed again and again and again. Pause. The man I'm talking about is William Henry Gates III, the man the world knows as Bill Gates. Pause. I'm Mark Epstein, and this is the Epstein Files. Pause. To understand what we're about to uncover today, we need to go back to a specific moment in time. It's October 2010. Jeffrey Epstein has already served his 13 months in the Palm Beach County Stockade, after pleading guilty in June 2008 to one count of soliciting prostitution from a minor, under the now infamous non-prosecution agreement negotiated by then United States Attorney Alexander Acosta in the Southern District of Florida. Source: Pacer. Case 0880736 CIV, Miami Herald. Perversion of Justice, Part 3. Epstein is a registered Level 3 sex offender in the state of New York. His name, his face, his crime, all public record. There is no ambiguity. There is no gray area. Pause. And yet, in late 2010, and continuing well into 2014, Bill Gates, the co-founder of Microsoft, the co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, one of the wealthiest humans who has ever lived, begins a series of meetings with Jeffrey Epstein, not in a public restaurant, not at a conference, at Epstein's private residence. The address: 9 East 71st Street, New York City. A 7-story, 40-room mansion, one of the largest private residences in Manhattan. Source: New York City property records, New York Times. Bill Gates met with Jeffrey Epstein many times, despite his past. October 12, 2019. Pause. But here's where it gets disturbing. Pause. The first question you need to ask is, how did they meet? According to reporting by the New York Times, published October 12, 2019, Gates and Epstein were introduced in 2011 by a mutual associate. The first confirmed meeting took place on January 31, 2011, at Epstein's Manhattan townhouse. This is not speculation. This date comes from scheduling records reviewed by the Times. Present at that meeting, according to the same report, were Jeffrey Epstein, Bill Gates, and at least 2 senior Gates Foundation officials, as well as Dr. Eva Anderson Dubin, a former Miss Sweden who had previously dated Epstein, and her husband, Glenn Dubin, a billionaire hedge fund manager. Source: New York Times, October 12, 2019. Confirmed by Gates Foundation spokesperson statements to the Times. Pause. Now, what did Bill Gates say about this meeting? Initially, through a spokesperson, Gates stated that the meeting was about philanthropy. Specifically, the idea discussed was a multi-billion-dollar global health fund that would be seeded by donations from the ultra-wealthy, with Epstein serving as an intermediary to bring in donors. Source: New York Times, October 12, 2019. Gates spokesperson Bridget Arnold's statements. Pause. Think about that for a moment. Bill Gates, whose own foundation already had an endowment exceeding $38 billion at the time, supposedly needed a convicted sex offender to introduce him to wealthy donors. Pause. Bill Gates, who had personal access to virtually every head of state, every CEO, every financial institution on Earth, needed Jeffrey Epstein as a fundraiser. Pause. That explanation didn't hold, and here's why. Pause. The meetings didn't stop. According to the New York Times investigation, Gates visited Epstein's Manhattan mansion on multiple occasions. The Times confirmed at least 3 visits to 9 East 71st Street in 2011 alone. Flight records reviewed by the Times also showed that on March 1st, 2013, Gates flew on one of Epstein's aircraft, a Gulfstream, from Teterboro Airport in New Jersey to Palm Beach, Florida. Source: New York Times, October 12, 2019. Flight records referenced in the Times investigation. Pause. Now, a Gates spokesperson confirmed the flight, but said Gates was not aware it was Epstein's plane. I'll let you sit with that one. Pause. A man who has been to Epstein's personal home multiple times, boards a private aircraft, and doesn't know whose plane it is. Pause. Let me add another layer. According to emails reviewed by the Times, after the January 2011 meeting, Gates emailed members of his staff. The email's characterization of Epstein, as described by the Times, included the assessment that Epstein's lifestyle is very different and kind of intriguing, although it would not be for me. Source: New York Times, October 12, 2019. Email described by sources with direct knowledge. Pause. Very different. Kind of intriguing. Pause. These are the words Bill Gates used to describe the lifestyle of a registered sex offender whose victims, girls as young as 14, had been documented in court filings in the Southern District of Florida. Source: Pacer. Case 08-80736, CIV. Victim statements in record. Now, if you're still here, it means you can handle the truth. So let me show you what they didn't want you to see. Let's talk about money, because this is where the so-called philanthropy explanation completely unravels. In 2014, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation donated $2 million to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology Media Lab. This donation, according to reporting by The New Yorker published on September 6, 2019 by Ronan Farrow, was directed by Epstein. The article revealed that MIT Media Lab director Joy Ito had been cultivating a financial relationship with Epstein, and that Epstein had helped direct donations from wealthy individuals, including, the reporting found, the Gates Foundation's contribution. Source: The New Yorker. Ronan Farrow, September 6, 2019. MIT Internal Review. Joy Ito resigned from MIT on September 7, 2019, the day after Farrow's report was published. An internal MIT investigation later confirmed that the Media Lab had accepted approximately $7.5 million in donations from Epstein himself, and that Epstein had been classified internally as disqualified, meaning his name had to be hidden from public records of donations. The word used in internal MIT emails, as reported by The New Yorker, was to label Epstein's contributions as anonymous and to refer to Epstein in correspondence as he who shall not be named, or simply Voldemort. Source: The New Yorker. September 6, 2019. MIT internal emails referenced in article. The Gates Foundation initially denied that its $2 million donation was connected to Epstein. But the timeline tells a different story. The donation came during the same period that Gates was actively meeting with Epstein. The donation went to a lab whose director had a direct financial pipeline to Epstein. And Epstein, by multiple accounts, was actively positioning himself as a philanthropic intermediary. Someone who could connect donors and institutions while taking a cut and gaining social legitimacy. And here's what's critical. For a man like Epstein, a convicted sex offender trying to rehabilitate his image, there was no greater currency than being able to say, "Bill Gates takes my meetings. Bill Gates flies on my plane. Bill Gates sends money where I tell him to." Whether Gates intended it or not, every meeting, every flight, every dollar routed through Epstein's orbit gave Epstein exactly what he needed most: the appearance of legitimacy. Now let me take you to another document trail. According to reporting by the Wall Street Journal, published May 24, 2023, internal records from J.P. Morgan Chase showed that Epstein had referenced his relationship with Gates in communications with the bank. This is significant because JP Morgan maintained Epstein as a client from 1998 to 2013, years after his 2008 conviction, and later settled a lawsuit brought by the US Virgin Islands for $290 million over the bank's relationship with Epstein. Source: JP Morgan Chase Settlement, USVI v. JP Morgan Chase. Case filed in SDNY. Wall Street Journal, May 21, 2023. Epstein, according to these records, used names like Gates and other prominent individuals to justify his continued value as a client. In other words, Epstein weaponized his association with Bill Gates as financial leverage. This is where the official story falls apart. In September 2019, when the New York Times story broke, a Gates spokesperson told the paper, "Bill Gates regrets ever meeting with Epstein and recognizes it was an error in judgment to do so." Source: New York Times, October 12, 2019, Bridget Arnold, Gates spokesperson. But here's the problem. In a 2019 interview with the Wall Street Journal prior to the Times expose, Gates himself had said the meetings were a huge mistake, but described them as limited. Then in 2021, during an interview with Anderson Cooper on CNN, Gates said, "I had several dinners with him. I regret doing that." He acknowledged the relationship had gone beyond a single meeting. Source: CNN. Anderson Cooper interview with Bill Gates, August 2021. And then the story shifted again. In May 2021, when Bill and Melinda French Gates announced their divorce after 27 years of marriage, multiple news outlets, including the Daily Beast on May 7, 2021, and the New York Times on May 16, 2021, reported that Melinda French Gates had expressed deep concern about her husband's meetings with Epstein as early as 2013. According to sources cited by the Times, Melinda Gates had attended one dinner with Epstein at the 71st Street townhouse in September 2013 and was reportedly deeply disturbed by Epstein and angry at her husband for the association. Source: New York Times, May 16, 2021. The Daily Beast, May 7, 2021. So to summarize the timeline of Gates's own explanations, first, the meetings were about philanthropy. Then they were a mistake. Then they were limited. Then they were several dinners. Then his wife knew and was furious. Then they divorced. The story kept changing, but the documents stayed the same. Now let's zoom out and connect this to the broader Epstein network. What Epstein did with Gates, he did with many of the world's most powerful people. Epstein understood something fundamental about power. Proximity is currency. If you can get a photograph, a flight record, a dinner, a donation pipeline, you can leverage that association into protection, access, and the kind of social armor that keeps prosecutors cautious and journalists at bay. The Bill Gates relationship wasn't just about one man's poor judgment. It reveals the architecture of how Epstein operated after his 2008 conviction. He didn't retreat. He rebuilt. He positioned himself as a philanthropic broker, someone who could connect wealth with science, with academia, with global health initiatives. He donated to institutions. He hosted dinners for Nobel laureates. He created the Jeffrey Epstein Sixth Foundation, registered in the US Virgin Islands, which funneled money to scientific research. And people like Bill Gates, knowingly or not, became pillars in that architecture. Their names on the guest list were Epstein's insurance policy. The questions that remain unanswered to this day are these. Why did Bill Gates continue meeting with Epstein after the first meeting, once he knew exactly who Epstein was and what he had done? What precisely was discussed in those meetings beyond vague references to philanthropy? Were any Gates Foundation funds directed at Epstein's suggestion beyond the confirmed MIT donation? And why did Gates's account of the relationship change so many times? These are not accusations, these are questions. And they are questions that Bill Gates has never fully answered under oath. Let me leave you with this. Jeffrey Epstein built his empire not just on money, not just on blackmail, not just on exploitation. He built it on the silence and complicity of people who should have known better. People who had the power to say no. People who had the resources to never need anything from a man like Jeffrey Epstein. And yet they came to dinner. They flew on the planes. They let their names be used. And when the truth came out, they called it a mistake. A mistake is forgetting an appointment, meeting a convicted sex offender at his private home, repeatedly, over years, while you run the largest private charitable foundation in the world dedicated to children's health. That is a choice. The powerful bury the truth. But paper has a longer memory than power. If this episode opened your eyes, hit subscribe and the bell icon, because every file matters. Comment below. Why do you think Bill Gates kept going back? I read every single one. Share this before it disappears from your feed. Next file, episode 36. We go inside the science. The strange experiments Epstein wanted to fund. The transhumanist obsessions. The plan to seed the human race with his DNA. And the scientists who actually listened. I'm Mark Epstein, and I'll see you in the next file.